and see what happens between Allison, Warfield, and Austin Yoast. And, of course, we don't actually know what happened, so we're not going to be spoiling anything. And if I'm not mistaken, they're actually still playing. And our new time-shifted technology allows us to start at the beginning and kind of catch up with that fast-forward effect.
Yeah, so players are underway here. Warfield with all their colors online in a search for Escanta on turn 2. Yoast had a Sky Marcher Aspirant into an Adanto Vanguard. Pretty good damage output on that side.
Oh, absolutely. And this is an ideal start for Yoast. But without any sort of burn, reach, or main deck counterspells, there's a chance Warfield can take all the way down to 1 life as far as damage is concerned, and then start using things like Root Snare to protect her life total. Now, if you want to see both these players' deck lists, you can check out the Cardboard Live extension on top of the screen. You'll be able to see the full 75 from both players, and we'll go over them as the things become more and more important. Wow, what an opening for Austin Yoast.
Yeah, big turn here. Add Snubbord Sentry, a Legion's Landing, and then a Venerated Loxodon, convoking 4 creatures.
Yeah, I mean, just so much power already.
Ooh, and Warfield's also following the script. 4 lands up to Wilderness Reclamation, all 4 untapped.
Oh, yeah. This is where the deck really starts going, and Austin Yoast is not going to be able to threaten lethal this turn, I don't believe. Pretty close, though, considering such an explosive turn last turn. The Snubbord Sentry, wow, that might be it.
Correction. Here's Penniless Marshal. This attack looks quite lethal now.
Yeah, I'm not even going to count it. It's just probably lethal.
City's Blessing for the Sentry. I half counted it. I got to a point where I knew it was lethal with the Marshal, and here's a Root Snare. That's going to make that 0 damage.
Yeah, and now we're going to see if Warfield can chain together a sequence of events that allows her to survive for a couple more turns. A second Wilderness Reclamation. If she's able to untap here and follow it up with Nexus of Fate, things could get hairy. But a Root Snare at the beginning of the turn for Austin Yoast, and this is a smart play, and I'll explain why in a moment. The fog effects are vulnerable to counterspells, and even though Allison is 99% sure Austin has no negates in his main deck, playing at the beginning of the turn prevents something like a main deck negate from completely ruining you. It's something not a lot of people really catch on, early in their Magic career. And Allison Warfield here, obviously a heads-up play.
Yeah, definitely good timing there. Warfield's going to check with Search for Escanta. She kept 1. That's troubling, but it was just an opt. And here's a 3rd Wilderness Reclamation. Just 1 card left over.
Yeah, and it looks like Allison's going to need a 3rd Root Snare here, or potentially a couple of cycles of Revitalize or something like that in order to not be dead. But if she's able to transform that Search for Escanta, she's going to be able to just chain Nexus of Fate and Nexus of Fate and Nexus of Fate.
Big attack for Yoast here. 7 creatures coming across.
Ooh, and this might be enough to do it. The newer addition to the deck, and Depose Deploy, allows Allison to create 2 Thopters and gain 2 life. And this is going to put up a roadblock in front of the 2 largest creatures, and that's actually going to save her from lethal damage, I believe.
Yes, so those block Sentry and Loxodon. So you have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 coming across.
Yeah, and Allison's going to take a chunk of damage, but now able to transform that Escanta, and with access to a ton of mana and 3 untaps at the end of the turn, she's going to be able to find that Nexus of Fate and start gaining a ton of extra cards and really steal this game from the brink of destruction.
Yeah, Warfield 1 to 3, but she keeps a card with the Search for Escanta, transforms that into the Sunken Rune, just with 3 Reclamations active.
Yeah, and this is really the strength of the deck comes from Search for Escanta and Wilderness Reclamation. And then once you find your first Nexus of Fate, it's all elementary from there.
Firing off a couple of ops, still has time to trigger those Reclamations, minimally get some more Escanta activations. She'll start there with the first Reclamation on tap.
Yeah, but has found 2 more copies of Root Snare, and that means she's going to have at least 2 more extra turns from Austin Yoast's attack steps. And Nexus of Fate means that this game is probably over right now. You see, every time you get to cast Nexus of Fate, you get all 3 of the Reclamation untaps again, as well as those Root Snares in hand with the Escanta. It's over.
Yeah. Just 3 activations of Escanta the Sunken Rune every turn, in addition to casting Nexus of Fate. This snowballs really quickly.
Yeah, this is really impressive stuff. Warfield really showing what her deck can do. And now finding that Depose Deploy She's able to cast that at some point to make some Thopters. Going to use that along with those Nexus of Fate to actually be the win condition. And that's really the strength of the Deposed Deploys in the deck, allowing you to have a card that plays defense really well, gaining a bit of life here, or just having a creature and drawing a card, the draw card aspect being important. It's just nice. It's a nice addition to the strategy.
The deck getting ever smaller with all these Escanta activations. At some point, Warfield's just a lock to take all of the turns, but we already know that she's found Root Snares. If she has to pass here, she can still win pretty trivially, and Yoast is going to pick them up.
Yeah, and like most intelligent people, Yoast values his time, picks them up, decides, hey, even if you do miss on finding a Nexus here in the next few activations of Escanta the Sunken Ruin, you still got 2 Root Snares.
Yeah.
So effectively you have like 40 more activations of Escanta before I get to kill you. I hate this deck. I hate Nexus of Fate so much. And I win a lot with it. I want to say that. I play a decent amount of Magic Arena. I've been playing it on Magic Online as well. And I win a lot with Nexus of Fate. And I hate it. I want it to be banned because it's not even fun for me. Because once the engine gets going, it takes me 15 minutes or whatever to actually kill my opponent.
It's extremely not my style.
Yeah, and a lot of people kind of spite you and make you play it out even though you're literally 100% to win.
Tell me how you feel about this one, though. I do the opposite. I spite them by conceding when it looks like I might lose. I know you enjoy doing this. I will not let you do it to me. Some people really enjoy playing this deck.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to take another turn. I'm going to take another turn, and another turn, and another turn.
Ryan?
My turn, my turn.
Those people are psychopaths. They need to be on an FBI watch list.
And I'm just like, cool, time for lunch. You can still do all the things. You can goldfish even without me sitting on the other side of the table.
In a lot of respects, I think the judge staff should be used a little more aggressively. Not to police people who play Bant Nexus, but to allow you to F6 while your opponent is taking all the turns.
Yeah, Judge, can you just make sure this is all legal? Yeah. I'm going to go hit the concessions.
Dude, a couple years ago, Michael Majors was a part of the Versus Live crew, and we actually had a match where he was testing out this new strategy. I don't even remember what it was, but he was kind of comboing off. I think, actually, he was just playing Storm in Modern, I believe. And he was just, comboing off and doing all this Pyromancer Ascension stuff. And I was just like, all right, Mr. Director, I'm gonna go grab a soda. I'm going to be back in a couple minutes. And I just, wrote F6 on a piece of paper and left the room. And I came back 5 minutes later. He was still going.
Sounds right.
Come on, man. Come on.
Yoast does have some good help in the sideboard. 4 negates coming in, though Warfield has some cool stuff in her sideboard, bringing in some creatures, which is kind of how you counteract the kind of strategy. 4 Hydroid Traces and 2 Lyra Dawnbringers for Warfield. Pretty cool approach to matchups like this.
Right, and I think Night of Autumn also a pretty big sideboard card for Allison Warfield as well. Not only as a means of unlocking your stuff from Conclave Tribunal, but also potentially gaining some life that you might need to survive an attack, trading with the creatures, and also just straight up checking a History of Benalia, destroying it as well as blocking the token it has already produced.
Yoast curving out again, Sky Marcher Aspirant into a Danto Vanguard, see if he has something powerful on turn 3. Warfield does not have the turn 2 search for Escanta, just a couple lands so far. Second Vanguard and a Dauntless Bodyguard protecting the Aspirant for Yoast. A lot of creatures as Warfield plays a Revitalize going to 16.
Yeah, and with a lot of those 2-mana cyclers and only 3 copies of Search for Escanta, you're going to see that as a more common play. Revitalize cycling, obviously not really doing a whole lot in terms of the rest of your game plan, but occasionally buying you enough time so that you can get your Wilderness Reclamation as well as Nexus of Fate online.
Night of Autumn is coming out of the sideboard for Warfield. She'll go back to 20 with the gain 4 life mode on that.
Yeah, and it puts up a nice blocker here. Can potentially trade with Aspirant or Dauntless Bodyguard. Still going to take quite a chunk from those 2 Adonta Vanguards and the other creature that goes unblocked, though.
Yep, 2 Vanguards and 2 2/1s coming across. Warfield will jump in front of the Bodyguard. Those will trade. Looks like 8 damage coming through. Warfield to 12. And History of Benalia, the post-combat follow-up for Yoast.
Yeah, this is not looking good. And these Bant Nexus decks are not known for playing sweepers. I personally like playing settle the wreckage as kind of as a fog effect, but also can potentially buy you a lot of time if your opponent runs headfirst into it. But this new version of Bant Nexus has no actual removal in the main deck or sideboard other than 2 copies of Crushing Canopy, instead putting a huge emphasis on the card Root Snare, as well as just kind of a combo kill with the Nexus of Fate Wilderness Reclamation package.
Warfield has the turn 4 Reclamation. Yoast is going to go ahead and attack with all the creatures. Seems like they're coming across. That's going to bump Warfield to 2. Here's a Revitalize back to 5, but she needs to do some big things on the following turn.
Yeah, and Revitalize is going to, pad her life total a little bit. She can potentially cast Depose, Deploy, make some Thopters gain some life, have a couple blockers go to 7, maybe survive the attack next turn. But it's a lot of damage coming through. She's going to need a Root Snare or something similar this turn to survive.
And there was a main phase deploy. Warfield went to 7 with 2 Thopter tokens, got to untap with a Reclamation, and on Yoast's turn, here's the attack, and there's the Root Snare. She'll stay at 7. Another history of Benalia for Yoast, but he kind of needs to find Negate at some point to punch through if Warfield's going to keep producing fogs.
Right, and I mean, there's a chance Austin just doesn't actually negate something like Root Snare, because there's a chance that Allison just has another Root Snare to stifle the attack anyway. And if Austin, gets double Root Snared and then untap plus Nexus of Fate, there's a chance he ends up just losing the game. So you're going to see him be pretty careful with those counterspells since they're so precious and so few.
And Warfield was just out. So Austin Yoast is going to tie things up. We're going to be going to the deciding third game here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the trick with Wilderness Reclamation, right? You need something to do with all that mana. Allison Warfield just cycled a few cards, cast an Opt here, Depose, Deploy there, and no real engine online with the search for Escanta, no Nexus of Fate to buy her more time, and just ran out of stuff to do. She showed her hand there at the end, just 3 lands. You really need something like Chemist's Insight to punch forward. If you're kind of breaking even with things like cycling your Revitalizes and Ops and whatnot, you're not really gaining any traction. That's why Search for Escanta is so important for the archetype, and one of the reasons why a lot of people advocate for 4 copies. I know our own Emma Handy, whenever she was playing the Bant Nexus decks in the previous standard season, was definitely on a hard 4 copies of Search for Escanta in the deck.
Yeah, the 4 search is definitely a strong endorsement for a legendary 2-mana card.
Right. That version did play a bunch of Chart of Course as a way to translate additional copies into other spells, but,
Players looking at opening hands. Yoast looked great. He's got both color and mana, some creatures, and a negate already. His turn 1 play was Legion's Landing on the draw. Warfield just with the Hallowed Fountain into Hinterland Harbor. Once again, no search for Escanta, but maybe something like a Revitalize on turn 2, as Yoast will deploy an Adanto Vanguard on 2 once again. The play for Warfield is Growth Spiral, putting in Hallowed Fountain. There could be a turn 3 Reclamation here.
Yeah, this is a pretty big play for Warfield. Growth Spiral, EOT, untap into a 4-mana card. This is deploy, generating some defense as well as padding her life total.
I like the main phase play there for Warfield a lot. She did not want this to get spell pierced, and these Thopters represent very significant blockers.
Right, and being able to trade for the Vampire token allows you to kind of shut off Legion's Landing for a turn. Austin is in a spot where he's got to choose between holding up for negate or deploying another threat. And it looks like with Benalia Marshal on hand, he is going to be just holding up negate for the rest of the game, basically.
Vanguard came across, Warfield blocked. Yoast will go ahead and pay 4 to 17 to make it indestructible, and Snubhorn Sentry is the follow-up. Now 3 creatures to transform the Legion's Landing. Yeah,
Warfield here with a Wilderness Reclamation drawn for the turn, decides not to cast into that negate, respecting that play quite well.
Yeah, she's playing very heads-up around these potential counter spells. And Benalia Marshal pre-combat. 3 creatures come across, and the Legion's Landing transforms, so once again, Yoast will have negate mana up this turn.
Yeah, this is a great play from Yoast, recognizing the transformation of Adanto. The first fort is going to give him enough mana to still cast that negate, applying max pressure with the Benalia Marshal.
Opt into Chemist's Insight for Warfield, just a couple redraws there. Still has to be wary of some counter spells. Arch of Vraska is the 6-mana source here. Here's Wilderness Reclamation. That's likely to prompt the negate, and there it is. Warfield puts it in the bin.
That's unfortunate. her draw was hinging on that card. Let's see if she can come out of this on top.
And that was the only counterspell in Yoast's hand. You see 3 white cards there as he deploys a Dauntless Bodyguard protecting his Marshal. Attack with his 4 creatures. The Sentry, does he have the City's Blessing now? Yes, that's online, exactly 10 permanents. Top your token, jumps in front of the Sentry. That's now a 5 power attacker.
Yeah, this is 9 damage coming through, not quite lethal, but Allison needed to block with her last Opter token, and there's going to have to be a lot of work done here in order for her to take this game.
Yeah, Warfield down to 5, but she needs a big turn here. Yeah. Going from the point of not having a Wilderness Reclamation means there's a lot of work to do. She'll cast Revitalize end step. She's at 8.
There's also a chance she just has access to a Root Snare in hand, but her life total not in jeopardy, so just not going for it. There's no reason to.
Yeah, if it's not lethal and your opponent's not red, don't fog.
Yeah. And here we see an upkeep Root Snare. This is going to play around a potential negate as a kill spell if Allison doesn't have another copy. With Kimser's Insight in the yard, though, we're going to continue churning through the deck, looking for Wilderness Reclamation as well as Nexus of Fate.
The inside jump started discarding Breeding Pool. Warfield draws for turn. Seems like the hand's not very excited. I want to say gummed up by a couple Revitalize. It's not bad, but it's a little mana hungry, and the 3 life is not necessarily relevant against this much power.
Yeah, and this is where you're going to see such an emphasis on cards like Root Snare and Nexus of Fate to buy more time. Unfortunately for Allison, this is not looking great, but still has time to find the things she needs. She's able to cycle some Revitalizes, even cast Knight of Autumn potentially. And here we see Lyra Dawnbringer actually putting up a pretty big roadblock.
Yeah, Lyra Dawnbringer is just huge when it comes to damage races. It's a 10-point swing. I guess depending when it's blocking, it's a little bit different. You know, you soak up whatever you block, gain 5 life. And if she also has Revitalize, which I believe she does, her life total is kind of functionally 16 going into this combat. So Yoast needs to do something about this.
Yeah, I mean, Lyra Dawnbringer has traditionally been a giant brick wall against aggro decks, and Austin looks like he doesn't have access to a way to clear it. Got his head in hands trying to figure out the best attack. My gut says swing with everything. You know, Yoast agrees.
Yep, that is the attack. Warfield's counting it out, seeing exactly what needs to be done about this to stabilize.
Interestingly enough, Warfield could actually go block, first strike, go to 13, and then cast Fog, Root Snare after the first strike damage has resolved. And that'll put her up to 13 life, as well as protect from the rest of the attackers. And then she can untap next turn, attack, put herself up to 18, and effectively out of harm's way.
And this is a nice block. She blocks on Beneless Marshal. That's protected by Dauntless Bodyguard, but that means you're also kind of blocking the Bodyguard because Yoast really wants to protect that creature.
Right, and thanks to First Strike, she'll be able to knock that off before combat damage, so effectively blocking both Bodyguard and Beneless Marshal with just that one block.
And so Yoast will sacrifice the Bodyguard, protect the Marshal. And there's Revitalize as a play. Warfield to 11 before damage. Lyra's going to make that 16. And then we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Was that 15 coming across?
13, 14, 15. Yeah, 15. Warfield going precariously low. Believe surviving at 1 life. Nexus of Fate.
Ooh.
This is the start of something beautiful.
That is so good when you have Lyra.
Yeah, free attack here. Gonna go up to 6 life, put Yoast down to 16. Yoast actually had a 4-turn clock with that Lyra Dawnbringer. Let's see if we can chain these together and steal a victory from the jaws of defeat.
It's no second Nexus, so Revitalize is going to start. We'll see what Warfield has for the rest of the turn.
Looked like there's a Wilderness Reclamation hiding out, drawn off the Revitalize. Not 100% though.
But even just getting that one attack with the Lyra, that was such a huge swing with that Nexus of Fate. There's another Revitalize, Warfield to 12. Breeding Pool tapped, and here's Knight of Autumn. Warfield to 16. Now things looking pretty good on her side.
Yep, we got 2 blockers, 16 life tapped out, but a single Anthem Effector. Conclave Tribunal, I think that's enough to do it.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge swing. That means that the Marshal is just safe. Attack coming across. Knight of Autumn's got to jump in front of whatever the biggest thing is.
Yeah, this is unfortunate for Warfield. Was unable to get traction. That Conclave Tribunal, as well as that timely negate on her first Wilderness Reclamation, meant is all she wrote.
Yeah, and Yoast moved very quickly there. That one.